This monstrosity, or the organism, as some people would name it, is a being of unknown origins that invades the skies of Earth once a year. No one knows the date, time, or place it will descend upon our planet, so more often than not, everyone is always on guard at some point, and if you find yourself outside the moment it descends on your town, you've got but a few seconds to make it indoors before it can reach you. No one knows if it hibernates on Earth or comes from outer space, but it never fails to devastate the lives around it when it makes an appearance. Also, to note, it was never this big before. According to documentation I've seen, there are images from years ago showing how it grew in size, probably from the amount it eats, the amount of humans, that is, as it seems to avoid other living organisms. It's unclear, but some speculate that it tries to manipulate its features to look more human. But each year that it emerges, it just looks more and more horrific. Its construed features, long finger-like tendrils, and spine-chilling smile, along with the odd mass it calls a body, this being is one you simply want to avoid at all costs. It has no other purpose besides consuming humans. Once it lowers to a town, or where it spots a generous amount of humans, it'll begin grabbing them with its tendrils and feeding them to itself until there are no humans left in sight. Sometimes, it'll sling the humans around until they stop moving. Other times, it'll eat them as they're screaming in terror, showing that it enjoys playing with its food. But it doesn't bother attacking humans that have already taken shelter indoors, as it seems to not want to waste some more energy knocking down buildings. This makes me think that, despite its large body, it is easily susceptible to damage, as most would assume it would damage buildings in order to get more food, and yet, it is not. Yes, the thought has crossed my mind, and probably others, more than once. Why not, for lack of better words, knock this creature out of the sky to end its yearly reign of terror? The answer is quite simple. There's no telling when and where it would descend, and there's simply not enough time to get an artillery strong enough to take it down. However, there are a good amount of armed forces in towns and cities it has already cursed its presence with, though it is not known to visit a city more than once. So visiting a town where it has already wreaked havoc in hopes of finally striking it down would be a fruitless endeavor. But everyone who has access to the news knows about this creature and understands what to do if they ever see it coming towards where they currently are. In places like towns and residential areas, it's rather easy to avoid this creature, as you could simply seek safety indoors. But in cases where people are outside, far away from civilization, or far from indoors period, the consequences can and will be fatal. Yet, those in the remote areas don't need to worry, as the organism usually seems to migrate towards places with larger populations. I've only vaguely described what this creature looks like. I'll go more into detail about its features now. The organism has a pale, deathly-like pink color all over its entire body, with brown-reddish spots on top of its body, as well as dark bruising on its underside and its sides. It has thin hairs coming from the reddish spots on top of its body, and long finger-like tendrils coming from its bat side, which it uses to extend and grab at things. It has incredibly large nostrils, as well as huge, dark, bulging eyes that it uses to spot people from a long distance. And its most horrific feature is probably its smile and its teeth. They're large, yellow, and gray, and can bite and chew through bone with ease. To give a good comparison on how big the organism is, or at least how big it was when most recently documented, it's about the size of a basketball court and only grows larger each time it is spotted. I can only imagine the absolute terror one must feel as they lay their eyes on such a being, with just mere seconds to reach safety. Not much is known about the organism and its anatomy, and so, using multiple excerpts, I'll decipher what and how I believe the organism's anatomy is situated. But first, I'll start with a running theory of mine which I believe to be true based on sightings and other observations. The amount of humans it eats is directly related to how it grows larger each year. Looking at news articles, The amount of humans it eats varies, but in the years it has fewer humans to eat, it did not seem to grow as large as it did years before when it had much more to consume. So, if there were to be a year where it had nothing to eat, perhaps its growth would cease. But I digress. I'll get into its anatomy now. The organism's teeth take up most of its body weight, as they are large, thick, and seem to reach back even farther than what we can see. I like to think that the organism is comprised of one bone, that bone being the skull, where all of its organs sit. I believe its brain to be on the smaller end and located between its eyes. I'd say its brain could be easily accessed if one were to enter through the nostrils, but this is something that has yet to be tested and probably will not be tested until we can safely get closer. As for its internal organs, I believe them to be similar to us humans, except besides being shades of red and pink, besides a few exceptions, the organism's organs may be shades of purple, looking at its gums and tongue. Getting into its digestive system, I believe it stops at the small intestines, and everything it eats is absorbed right back into its body. There are no source of excrements, and if it does need to get rid of unwanted things such as clothing or jewelry, it will leave its body the same way it came in, through its mouth. Its eyes seem as if they're able to spot things from yards away, maybe miles even, as it usually spots people in towns before anyone in that town spots it. Its large, dark eyes bulge out from the sides of its head, almost as if they're threatening to fall out just from being so large. This may be a result of its botched attempt to mimic how humans look. The same goes for the hairs on top of its body and the tendrils on its backside, which are about as long as its body and are able to grab humans with ease. I would love nothing more than to get a close and personal look at this creature, but I'm unable to do so due to its highly aggressive nature as well as its size. Not to mention that I'm unsure of where exactly it will be landing next, and the only way to get this creature to a weakened state is to rid it of its food source. At least that is what I believe. This means that before it can reach a city, everyone must be inside, leaving it with nothing to consume. I hope that once this happens, if it can happen, it goes off to where it came from, and the next year it reveals itself, it is noticeably smaller. But even if that does happen, who's to say it won't act more aggressively than it has been? Either way, it's that or having artillery stationed in almost every city it has yet to attack, which is highly unrealistic. And so, the former of the two is the better option here. But even then, how will it act when harmed to the point of incapacitation? There are too many variables at play here, so who knows what will truly work. But still, I'm unsure of how far I'll truly go in order to be able to study this creature properly and with the right set of tools. Perhaps some action needs to be taken.